Some beings are not born to live, but to possess someone else's flesh. And if you hear crying from where no one should be, pray that it's not calling your name. Welcome back to Whisper Horror Channel. If you enjoy chilling true stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below what scares you the most. Tonight, we begin with a story where the line between life and death has been torn apart. If a child can form after the mother is dead, is it still life? Not all life should be welcomed. Some things are born not to live, but to take. My name is Naomi Ellis, 32 years old, chief nurse of obstetrics at Halloran Memorial Hospital, a county facility deep in the Cascade Mountains, Oregon. I used to believe I came here to start over. But perhaps I was just running away. I was born in Santa Rosa, California, where there was more sun than rain and hospitals popped up like fast food restaurants. I worked as a resident nurse at a large obstetric center there. Until the accident happened. A patient died on the delivery table. Not directly my fault, but I was the head of the shift. I still remember the husband's eyes when he asked, "Why couldn't you stop it?" I had no answer. I still don't. After an internal investigation and 3 months of mandatory therapy, I decided to leave the city. I no longer wanted to advance. Didn't want to stand in bright hallways with dozens of doctors yelling orders. I wanted a quiet place. A place where, if I made a mistake, I could take responsibility. Alone. Halloran Ridge was such a place. The town nestled among pine forests and fog. Population less than 3,000. Mostly elderly people and families who had lived there for 3 generations. There was no shopping mall here, no medical school, no Starbucks. Only one gas station, a single pharmacy, and a solitary road connecting to Highway 22. In winter, this road would be frozen for up to 3 weeks. To outsiders, Halloran Ridge was just a faint mark on the map, a place people passed through but never stopped at. But I stopped. The first time I came here was on a December afternoon, cold, gray, and unusually silent. Snow covered the entrance to Halloran Memorial Hospital, turning it into a blurry architectural mass among the pine trees. I turned off the car, hands still on the steering wheel, and sat there for a few minutes. Not because I was scared, but because I felt peace. As if car horns, phones, and dreams of a successful medical career had been left behind at the entrance to this town. I didn't know if it was a beginning, or a warning. 8 years later, I became the head of obstetrics, one of the hospital's busiest departments. We handled about 15 to 20 births a month. Some days I wouldn't leave the hospital for more than 12 hours. But I loved this job. Because the moment a new life cried for the first time, it always sent shivers down my spine. Was it emotion? Or biological reflex? I wasn't sure. I'm that kind of person, rational, analytical, and always questioning. I didn't believe in fate or ghosts. I once told Dr. Kramer, the head of anesthesiology, that if anyone saw a ghost in the hospital, I'd ask them to remeasure their blood oxygen. He laughed. Claire, the night nurse, shivered. "You haven't been here long enough." I smiled, believing the scariest thing in a hospital wasn't ghosts, but human error. Then everything changed. One April morning. Light fog. I woke up at 5:30 as usual, brewed coffee with my old machine, turned on NPR radio, preparing for my shift. I put on my white coat, tied my hair, checked my heart rate with my smartwatch, 68 BPM. Normal. I drove through the familiar road, a 10-kilometer-long, secluded forest path but faster than the main route. I had driven that road hundreds of times. But that morning, something was wrong. No collision. No loud noise. No slow-motion footage like a Hollywood movie. Just a blank. When I opened my eyes, I was in the ICU. Breathing tube. White lights. The steady beep of monitors. The first face I saw was Claire's. She burst into tears when I blinked. She's awake. Naomi's awake. They said I was clinically dead. For 4 minutes. Heart stopped. No brain waves. Then, just came back. A miracle, they called it. But what they, and I, didn't know, was that I didn't come back alone. 3 days after waking up, I was moved out of the ICU. No more breathing tubes. No more for morphine. Only a deep silence inside me remained, as if my body wasn't entirely mine anymore. I didn't tell anyone about that feeling. Not because I was afraid they'd think I was crazy, but because I didn't know what to call it myself. A kind of alienation in my own skin. As if something was slowly learning to exist inside me. Colleagues visited, some brought cake, some brought flowers, all called me the Halloran Miracle. For minutes of cardiac arrest, then came back on your own. You're a legend, Dr. Kramer half-joked. But I just forced a smile. Because I knew, this was no miracle. I remembered the moment between two worlds. No white light. No tunnel. No angels. Only darkness. Absolute. No ceiling. No floor. No form. No sound, except a faint heartbeat, soft as a small blood vessel, but not mine. Something incomplete was living in it. After being discharged, Claire drove me to my small apartment on the western edge of town. She drove, I looked out the window. Douglas fir trees stretched along the road like needles in a sleeping artery. There have been a lot of accidents lately, Claire said. Probably due to thicker fog than usual. I nodded. Didn't reply. I didn't tell her that ever since I woke up. Every step I took echoed like a heartbeat. That I had a feeling, like a new circulatory system was forming, something not found in anatomy books. That night, I didn't sleep. No dreams. Just awake, lying still, listening. And I felt it, a very faint pulse, but not in my chest, but in my abdomen. The next morning, I quietly drove out of town. Not to the hospital. I went to a private clinic nearly 30 minutes from Halloran Ridge, where no one knew I was a chief nurse. The doctor was an elderly woman. Cold, professional. She performed the ultrasound without asking many questions. But when the transducer touched my abdomen, she paused. The screen flickered. A bright spot appeared, steadily, beating. "Do you know you're pregnant?" she asked. I laughed, a reflex. "No way." She frowned. "Naomi, you're 6 weeks pregnant." I was stunned. 6 weeks? I was clinically dead, 3 weeks ago. I had no partner. No relationship in over a year. I lived alone. I took my medication regularly. No assault. No possibility at all. I tried to listen to the doctor's words, about the heartbeat. The amniotic sac, gestational age, but it all seemed to pass through a blurred glass. On the screen, that bright spot, beat strongly. Very strongly. "Do you intend to keep it?" the doctor asked. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stared at the screen. And in that moment, I felt it was looking back at me. Not with eyes, but with a kind of consciousness. That night, I sat huddled in the corner of my bed. No crying. No screaming. Only pure terror seeping into every capillary. I was a nurse. I understood physiology. I knew about the ovulation cycle, fertilization, implantation, and fetal development. But no theory could explain what was growing inside my belly. It shouldn't exist. And from that moment, I knew I had to find out what it was. Before it was born. Or worse. Before I was no longer Naomi. Week 14. The pregnancy progressed completely normally, by all clinical indicators. Fetal heart rate regular. Blood pressure stable. No preeclampsia, no infection. If I didn't know I had died 3 weeks before being diagnosed pregnant, everything would have been perfect. But from week 13, I started hearing voices. Not in my head. Not auditory hallucinations. But from beneath the skin of my abdomen. Whenever I lay on my side, especially when night fell and everything in the cabin was silent, I would hear whispers. Soft as wind whistling through a crack in the door. Words unclear. Not a child's voice. Not my voice. But something older. It didn't scream. It didn't call. It whispered to exist. I still went to the hospital, still worked, still pretended to be myself. But every night I woke up in the middle of a dream, drenched in sweat. My hand unconsciously placed on my abdomen, where that sound was murmuring. Week 18 of pregnancy. I went for my routine ultrasound. For the first time, the screen was distorted. Black streaks spread like ink spilled in water. The machine suddenly turned off, then restarted. Twice. 3 times. Probably a transducer error, the technician mumbled. But his face no longer held its professional detachment. When the image reappeared, it was blurry as if covered in smoke. I stared at the printout. The shape of the fetus, unclear. That night, I taped the picture to the refrigerator. And when I walked into the kitchen at midnight, I swear, it had changed. No longer a fetal image. But a black circle, empty, cold, like a wide-open eye. Without eyelids, staring straight at me. Week 20. Mothers often say, fetal movement is the first miracle of a child. But what I felt was not a kick. It was a knock. 3 beats. Always 3. Always at 3:33 a.m. Not random. Not mechanical vibration. But a signal, regular, purposeful. As if someone was trying to be opened from within. I tried to record it. But every time I hit record, my phone turned off. Even with a full battery. Even though I had just charged it. Once, it turned itself back on, and in the photo library was a strange file, 333.wave. When I opened it, it was just static, and a dull thud, like knocking on hollow metal. Then came the dreams. In my dreams, I lay naked in a pitch-black room. No doors. No ceiling. No bottom. The only light came from my abdomen, swollen, subtly twitching as if the skin was about to burst. I started pushing. No one guided me. No one helped. What emerged was not a child, but a black mass, slimy, cold, boneless, shapeless. It rolled onto the floor. I thought it was over, until it opened its eye. A large, bloodshot eye, with no whites. The pupil black as burning coal. And it stared straight at me. Not through a dream. Not through symbols. But real. I screamed and woke up, the bed sheets torn from my nails clawing into them. My hand was still on my abdomen, where I felt it was stirring. I started taking notes, every detail, every hour, every sound. But every morning I woke up, the notebook was blank. No ink marks. No pen indentations. As if I had never written anything. I didn't tell anyone anymore. Not because I was afraid they'd think I was delusional. But because I knew they wouldn't understand. They had never heard whispers from their own belly. They had never felt a non-human entity borrowing their body to enter this world. They had never been knocked 3 times, from the inside. Week 21 of pregnancy. I left my apartment. Not because I wanted to. But because I had no choice. The gaze of my colleagues, from sympathy, gradually turned to caution. Claire was still gentle. But had started avoiding shifts with me. An obstetrician, after a morning briefing, gently suggested I take a leave of absence to stabilize my mental state. I understood that language. I had used it with traumatized patients. I didn't want to face questions I couldn't answer. So, I disappeared. I rented a small wooden cabin on the edge of the forest, 15 minutes from town. No neighbors, no phone signal. The former owners were an elderly couple who had moved out in the 90s. The cabin was nothing special, 2 small rooms, a wooden kitchen, an old fireplace. Floors creaking like a long-time smoker's lungs. But it was silent. So silent I could hear my own blood flowing through my temples. I thought, at least, here. If everything falls apart, no one will witness it. On the 3rd night, while wiping the sink, I noticed a loose wooden board behind it. Something was strange. I don't know what made me pry it open, curiosity, or instinct. Inside was a small hollow. Just big enough for a notebook. Wrapped in old cloth, smelling of damp and time. I brought it to the fireplace, opened the first page. The first line made me stop breathing. The thing inside me is not human. The handwriting was slanted. Shaky, as if written when the hand was no longer in control. The woman, unnamed, recounted living alone in the cabin. And being pregnant. But that fetus spoke to her in dreams. It used the voices of children who had never been born. I quickly flipped through the pages. Every detail was identical to what I was experiencing. The knocking at 3:33 a.m. Distorted ultrasound images. The feeling of being watched from within. And especially, no one believes I'm pregnant. The near final page became chaotic. The writing scrawled, "Ask you." Some parts were blurred like tear stains. She had prayed, had self-medicated, but it wouldn't leave. Then the last line, not written in ink, but in blood, dried with time. If you read this, leave while you still can. I sat motionless before the fireplace. Outside, the forest was covered in a coal-black darkness. Wind battered the window like a warning. But the cabin didn't move. Only a very small sound, like fingernails gently tapping wood, echoed from the bathroom where I found the diary. I stood up, walked towards it, each step heavy as lead. My heart beat out of sync, not biologically, but with a different logic. The bathroom door was ajar. Inside was darkness. I reached in and turned on the light. No one. Nothing. Except the mirror. And on the mirror, was a faint streak like steam, but it wasn't cold tonight. The streak formed 3 fingerprints. Small. And slowly, it dried. I didn't scream. I just stared at the mark until it vanished, as if it had never existed. That night, I placed the diary right beside my pillow. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone in my nightmare. Because clearly, I wasn't the first. I didn't leave the cabin the next day. Didn't eat. Didn't sleep. Just reread every line of the old diary, as if through those decaying words. I could talk to that woman. The one who had gone before me. The one who might have ended where I was beginning. But instead of leaving as she warned, I stayed. Not because I was brave, but because I needed to know what was truly happening to my body. Early the next morning, I drove to the Halloran Ridge Town Library. The gray brick building stood silently beside the old cemetery, where moss-covered headstones leaned at odd angles. Inside, the smell of old paper and damp filled the air. A place where time had stopped. The librarian was an old woman with silver hair, thin as a bone, wearing thick glasses. When I asked about unusual pregnancies and folk superstitions, she didn't laugh, didn't question, just looked at me for a long time. Then slowly nodded. She turned, opened a locked wooden drawer, took out an old brown folder of documents, and a handmade leather-bound book, with no author listed. The book's cover was printed in red ink, the 13th cycle. According to the documents inside, mostly transcriptions from the late 19th century, there was an ancient legend of the indigenous people who once lived in this area. Before they vanished without a trace. They believed there was an entity with no fixed form, which could only be born into the physical world through a sequence of 12 failed pregnancies. Each failure, meaning the mother died, miscarried, or the fetus was stillborn, it learned something new. It adapted. It waited. Until the 13th time, if the pregnant woman survived, and the birth process was completed, the entity would exist permanently in human form. No one knew what would happen then. Only one line repeated in the notes. Blood will spill. And darkness will spread. I closed the folder, my hands trembling slightly. I was the 13th. That night, I dreamed I was standing in a circle of black ash, no light, no way out. Around me were 12 women in funeral dresses, faces covered with black veils. No one spoke. But I heard every sound clearly. You were chosen. Don't resist. It will find its way out. I woke up with blood flowing down my throat from a nosebleed. The next day, I returned to the library. I delved into undigitized articles, local notes, old death records. And then I found an article from 1992, about a series of mysterious traffic accidents on the very road where I had my accident, Highway 41, southbound. Victims, 7 women. Ages 25 to 35. All clinically dead for 3 to 5 minutes, then revived unharmed. All found to be pregnant, with no clear cause. One name made my stomach clench, Margaret Ellswick, chief nurse at Halloran Clinic. Missing since 1994. I had seen her picture hanging in the hospital hallway, a stern face, melancholic eyes. No one knew where she had gone. I went back to the cabin. Looked in the mirror for a long time. Not to check my belly, but to look into my own eyes. Deep within. And I saw it, something looking back. That night, the cabin was suffocatingly silent. No insects. No wind. No sound at all. Only a small hiss, from the attic, where I had never dared to go up. I stayed awake all night, the newspaper printout on my chest. The 13th cycle under my pillow. And I wondered if I wasn't the first. Then had anyone ever survived to tell this story? Week 36 of pregnancy. No more doubt. No more ambiguity. It was ready. I woke up at 3:28 a.m. by a blinding pain piercing straight from my abdomen to my spine. Not labor contractions. This pain was sharp and cold like a blade, twisting from the inside out, as if it was tearing its own way out. I sprang out of bed, but something warm and wet trickled down my legs. When I turned on the light, the bedsheet was stained a deep red. Blood. Blood everywhere. I didn't scream. No energy left. Just crawled towards the phone to call for help. The screen was black. Wouldn't turn on. I plugged it in. No effect. The TV flickered with white light, like malfunctioning life support. The refrigerator groaned. The chandelier flickered like a dying EKG. The cabin, cut off from the world. I tried to open the window, wind blew in like cold fingernails scratching skin. Rain battered the porch like hurried footsteps. I turned on the faucet. A trickle of water. Clear. Then muddy. Then, red. Red like arterial blood. I crawled into the bathroom, my body trembling, cold sweat pouring from every pore. A feeling of being possessed from within. And then, I heard it. A cry. Not from a speaker. Not echoing from outside the door. But from my belly. A hoarse cry. Jerky. As if forced through layers of flesh. Not the sound of a normal child. But something that had waited too long to escape where it shouldn't exist. I clutched the edge of the bathtub, feeling like my pelvis was opening without warning. No contractions, no progression, just compulsion. I don't remember when I passed out. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in the cold bathtub. Water up to my waist. The room was absolutely silent. No more crying. No blood. No fluid. Just a feeling of extreme emptiness. I placed my hand on my abdomen. Flat. Nothing there anymore. No signs of birth, no blood, no placenta, no postpartum pain. My belly, once distended with a 36-week pregnancy, was now as flat as if I had never been pregnant. I staggered to my feet, not knowing what was more terrifying. Losing the child, or knowing it had escaped without needing to be born. On the bathroom mirror, there was a line of writing, as if drawn with a wet finger. I was here. I walked out of the room, each step like treading on another world, where there was no time. No people. No evidence. But I knew one thing. That thing was born. Without medicine. Without blood. Without the mother's permission. It needed no one to deliver it. And what I dared not think was that it was still here. Not in my belly. But in the cabin. In the darkness. In every knock that would follow. I was taken to the hospital that afternoon. How, I don't remember. Doctors said I had knocked on the door of a house 2 kilometers away. My hands covered in blood, unable to utter a word. They diagnosed miscarriage due to extreme delusion. No prenatal records. No ultrasound. No signs of pregnancy. My abdomen had no stretch marks. I said the child had escaped without being born. They prescribed sedatives. I remained silent. Not because I believed them, but because I knew no one ever believed people like me. After a week, I was discharged. I didn't go back to my old apartment. I returned to the cabin. The cabin was empty, but not cold. The air was dead silent, as if every dust particle was holding its breath. I sat down on the bed, without taking off my shoes, without turning on the light. I waited. Didn't know what I was waiting for. Maybe a sound. Maybe proof. On the third day, the crib appeared. I didn't put it there. I had never bought one. It sat in the middle of the bedroom, white painted wood, classic style, faint carved patterns gently curved like waves. The crib was empty, but it swayed on its own. Night fell. I lay motionless on the bed, eyes fixed on the crib. It rocked gently, no wind. No one touching it. As if an invisible hand was rocking something no one could see. I heard crying. Unclear. Not close. But echoing from the walls. Sometimes from the vents. Sometimes from the fireplace. Sometimes from the kitchen drain. And then, from my belly. Not phantom pain. Not post-miscarriage hallucination. But a resentful cry, broken, distorted by layers of skin and flesh. I couldn't sleep. Every night I woke, listening to microsounds. Very light footsteps running on the roof. Children's laughter echoing from under the bed. A shadow flickering across the mirror, not mine. I tried to leave. But every time I packed, the power went out. The car wouldn't start. The door wouldn't open. I was locked in. Not by a lock, but by a will. On the seventh day, I didn't sleep. On the ceiling, water stains spread into the shape of a distorted child's face, screaming. The crib still rocked. Slowly. Steadily. Never stopping. I walked closer, for the first time in a week. Placed my hand on the railing. Freezing cold. Not a physical cold, but the cold of an occupied space. I looked inside. Empty. But I knew it wasn't empty. I was no longer sure what was real. What was illusion. But there was one thing I didn't doubt. It had never left. No longer in my belly. But in this house. In the whistling wind. In the eyes I saw reflected. In every crack in the walls. And it was growing, not in me, but in this world. 273 nights passed since the accident. I didn't count. My body counted. Because tonight, like a predetermined cycle, it would come. Not a child. But the thing I had inadvertently opened the way for its birth. 2:58 a.m. I sat huddled on the wooden chair by the window. Blanket draped over my knees. The air wasn't cold. But fear had its own temperature, and it was dropping every minute. The wall clock ticked, not fast, not slow. Just precise. 3 o'clock, 3:11. 3:21. I didn't sleep. Didn't blink. Every tick was a brief whisper from the other side of the mirror. I started imagining the familiar scene from my dreams all week. A dark shadow standing at the threshold. 3 knocks. Then a whisper, they said, "You weren't pregnant." But I'm here. I'm still here. 3:32. I gripped the blanket tightly. My heart pounded. Not because of a specific sound, but because my body knew. It was time. 3:33. Knock. 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 3 knocks. Soft. But clear. Not loud, but enough for all my senses to reach it. I froze. Then, 3 more knocks. Not from the door. From my belly. 3 gentle knocks. Like a response. I stood up. At that moment, I didn't tremble. Not anymore. Something else arose, not courage. Not resistance. Perhaps it was forced consent becoming instinct. I walked to the door. Each step echoed like confirmation that I knew exactly what I was doing. Hand on the doorknob. I opened it. No one. Only a dense curtain of night like ink, no fog, no wind, no time. But I felt it standing right at the edge of my vision. 1 more step. Then the knocking sounded again. Not from the door. Not from my belly. But from behind me. I turned around. The mirror in the living room reflected my image, and another shadow. No face. No hair. No clear form. Just a faint outline of something once called human. I gasped. My abdomen ached sharply. Not like labor. But like being twisted from within. Then, all 3 sides echoed with knocks. The door. The mirror. My belly. 3 beats. Simultaneously. Like a ritual completed. I sank to the floor. No longer wanting to hide. Hands on my belly, now no longer its old shape. Not pregnant. Not flat. But something, reforming itself. I whispered. I know you're there. So, what do you want? No answer. Only a small laugh. Not echoing in my ears. But from my bones. From my blood. From my guts. A sound, too close to be from outside. Then, the darkness began to move. No longer part of the night. It crept across the glass, seeped through the door crack, crawled onto the ceiling, touching my skin like cold liquid. The cabin was no longer a space. It became a second womb. And I, no longer the host. I was the gateway. 3:33, the hour of demons. Of reincarnation. Of completed ritual. I screamed. Soundlessly. My voice withdrawn from the world. Only the knocking remained. 3 beats. Like a newborn heartbeat. I slammed the door shut. Unlocked. Unblocked. Just closed. The wind outside immediately howled as if the night was offended by the rejected invitation. The room was still the same, but I was not. I stepped back. And tripped on a small piece of paper sticking out from under the doormat. I bent down. A photo, old, stained, corners torn as if someone had tried to rip it. I wiped off the dust, and my heart constricted. In the photo was the woman who wrote the diary. Standing in front of the cabin. Beside her was a man in a white coat. A note on the back written in faded blue ink, Dr. Malcolm Virelli, Halloran Ridge Medical Center. I called Nora, an old colleague still on night duty at Halloran Memorial Hospital. Naomi? At this hour, what is it? I found a picture. There's a doctor named Malcolm Virelli. Do you know? Nora cut me off. Her voice changed immediately. Don't mention him. I gripped the phone tightly. Why? Silence. Then Nora said. He died. In 1989. In a hospital fire. But, there are rumors, about experiments. About unsuccessful pregnancies, that still continued. People call them cursed loops. I didn't say another word. Hung up. And started digging through the old documents I had brought back from the town library, crumbling papers, local newspapers, and copies of medical records that had been gathering dust for decades. I found an article from 1990, title typed. Burnt basement discovered at Halloran Medical, traces of unethical experiments. Below was a blurry photo, taken inside the basement. Metal tables lined up. A row of test tubes. A blackboard with scrawled writing, embryo number 01, number 12. I collapsed onto the floor. Not because of fear, but because everything fit. 12 embryos. 12 failed cycles. I was the 13th. Note below the photo. Unverified internal reports suggest Dr. Virelli conducted illegal research on supermatter life forms through a series of artificial pregnancies. All records were destroyed. No living witnesses. No medical evidence remained. I looked back at the old photo in my hand, the woman from the diary and Dr. Virelli. No longer a question. She wasn't an accidental mother. She was also a vessel. I was not an exception. Not a victim of the supernatural. I was a data point. Part of a series of experiments. And if it was true as stated in the notes, the 13th cycle will complete the reincarnation, then I was the result. I felt disgusted with my own body. Not because I had been pregnant, but because I didn't know if anything in me was truly mine anymore. No ritual. No magic. No biblical demons. Just science, distorted. I walked into the bathroom, looked in the mirror. No blood. No surgical scars. But in my eyes, something wasn't reflecting as before. I wondered. If that child isn't human, if I'm not the mother, then what am I? I don't remember how I fell asleep. I only know that when I opened my eyes, the light was still on. A faint yellow light shone weakly onto the fine dusty wooden floor, covered in silence like ashes. The window was ajar. The wind wasn't blowing in, but the curtains swayed. The wall clock had stopped. The hand stopped precisely at 3:33. 3 knocks. Not loud. Not hurried. Like a reminder, I'm back. And this time, I'm not leaving. I stood up, my abdomen empty but heavy. The feeling wasn't pregnancy, but like my body was still nurturing something, on another level. I walked to the door. Opened it. No one. Only a thin mist, covering the steps. The mist was ivory, like wax. And in the middle was a child. Naked. Tiny. Skin pale as powdered stone. Limbs delicate, unmoving. Eyes wide open, no pupils. No irises. Just 2 faint white spots staring intently at me. I didn't scream. Didn't run. I crouched down. The child didn't cry. Didn't whimper. Didn't twitch like a normal newborn. It mouthed words. No sound. But in my head, a voice resonated, deep, heavy, and dense like a chord from the abyss. Mother cannot abandon me again. This time, I will stay. I reached out my hand. Not because I was hypnotized. Not because I forgave. But because I no longer knew what else to do. My fingers touched its skin. Cold. Not the cold of a corpse. It was a sterile cold, like touching an underground metal mirror. I picked it up. Its body light as silk. But when it touched me, something connected. Not like an umbilical cord. Not like hormones. But like a synchronized data stream. An identification code finding its matching host. I looked down at the child's abdomen. A thin scar like a thread, gently curved in a crescent shape. Not a belly button. Not in the center of the abdomen. Shifted to the left. Just below the ribs. I slowly lifted my shirt. Just below the skin of my chest, in the same spot. An identical scar. No pain. No stitches. Not in my medical records. I had never had surgery there. No one had ever taken it out of me. It had escaped on its own. I knelt on the porch. The child lay in my arms. Eyes still unblinking. No bird song. No wind sound. No clock ticking. The whole world seemed to be held still by this moment. 3:33 a.m. The cabin on the edge of Halloran Ridge. A child that didn't cry. Didn't give birth. Didn't die. Just whispered through the mind. I was no longer a mother in the biological sense. I was the final nest. Where it chose to cross the last threshold of existence. And I had allowed it. Nothing left to run from. I walked into the house. Closed the door. Unlocked. No prayers. No hope. Just knowing, it was born. I don't know what guided my steps then. Reason? Instinct? Perhaps it no longer mattered. I only knew that when the cabin door closed behind me, when the faint yellow light from the ceiling lamp cast down on the dusty wooden floor, when the child lay in my arms, I no longer felt fear. No more crying. No knocking. Only a thick silence, as if the whole world had stopped moving to witness something that shouldn't have happened. I placed the child on the old blanket, the blanket I used to cushion my head on sleepless nights. I wrapped it up. Gently. Not because it needed warmth, but because I needed to do something familiar. It didn't close its eyes. Didn't move. But those eyes, white, unreflecting, still looked at me. Like a two-way mirror. I made milk. Not because it was hungry. Not because I thought it needed it. But because I needed to believe I still had some control. I wiped its body with a warm towel. Read children's books. Played lullabies on my old phone that no longer had a SIM card. Not because it needed to sleep. But because I didn't want to think about what would happen if I left it there, in silence. That night, I slept. No dreams. No nightmares. Only a void. Quiet. Like the bottom of a lake. The next morning, it was still there. No crying. No hunger. No change. I placed my finger on its wrist. No pulse. No warmth. No biological signs. But it was alive, in a way that medicine had never defined. I started writing a diary. Not for anyone to read. But to talk to myself, or the thing in the house that was slowly merging with every breath. The first pages, date, time, temperature, behavior. Then it gradually changed to 3:33 a.m., no more knocking outside the door. Only in my head. It stared at me unblinking for 6 hours. I tried to turn away, but I could still feel its gaze on the back of my neck. Last night, I dreamed of a gray room. No doors. No sound. It stood in the middle of the room. But in the dream, it was as tall as I was. A week later, I opened to the last page. A line written in a completely different hand from the previous sections. My child is not human, But it is mine. I don't remember writing that sentence. But I didn't deny it. I looked up, it was still there. Eyes unblinking. But, in its depths, for the first time, something stirred. Not emotion. But a recognition. It knew I had accepted it. I tidied the cabin. Fixed the window. Rehung the curtains. Placed the crib next to the bed. I didn't turn on the Wi-Fi. Didn't contact anyone. Nothing left to explain. No one left to understand. I lived with it. Day after day. Not growing. Not speaking. Not needing me, but not leaving me. Every night, I heard the knocking. Not from the door. But from the walls. From under the floor. From inside my own chest. 3 beats. Always 3. I thought. Perhaps it was not fully born yet. Perhaps. I was just the first to accept. But I had no regrets. Because I was its mother. And it was my child. Whether this world recognized it or not. If you ever wake up in the middle of the night and hear 3 knocks, don't rush out of bed. Because the thing standing outside the door may not want to come in, but to come back. If you ever feel your belly heavy even though you're not pregnant, or see a faint scar where you don't remember having one, don't Google it. Because the right answer won't be there. If you live alone and still hear whispers just beneath the skin of your abdomen, sit down. Breathe. Don't run. Because if you've been chosen, there will be nowhere left to go. I write these lines not to warn, nor to ask for help. I know it's too late for that. I just want to leave a mark. Proof that I was once human. That I tried to understand. Tried to resist. And finally, I let it be born. I don't know where it will go. How long it will stay in this cabin. Or where it will find its next mother. I only know that every time the clock strikes 3:33, I hear the knocking, not from the door, not from my belly, but from behind the wall of memory. If you ever visit Halloran Ridge, ever drive on Highway 41 in winter, ever stop your car because the fog is too thick, and ever see a small cabin on the edge of the forest, turn back. Right. Then. Don't knock on the door. Don't look through the window. Don't listen to the faint lullaby from the room inside. Because perhaps it's looking for a new reincarnation. Or worse, it has already chosen you. But not only the unborn find a way back. Sometimes it's the dead children, still waiting for someone, inside a hospital room. Do you believe in children who have died but still linger, waiting for a new friend? They say that hospitals are where life begins and where death quietly ends. But sometimes the end isn't complete. Sometimes something gets stuck in the hazy dust of memory, in the long corridors echoing with footsteps, in seemingly harmless toys. Welcome to Whisper Horror Channel, where stories rejected by science are told in whispers. Tonight, we won't go far. We'll just step into a hospital room, where a child lies sleeping, and a mother sits awake by the bed. She will tell you about a laugh without a mouth, a hand without a body, and a friend who never grows up. Autumn in Connecticut always carried the chilly beauty of a torn postcard. Maple leaves blazed fiery red in layers, carpeting the winding mountain roads leading into Oakhaven, a place where Google Maps always lost signal at the last turn. The Thorne family arrived here on a Monday morning. No one welcomed them. No neighbors waved. Only silent trees lined both sides of the driveway, standing in rows as if staring at their car, as if the whole town was holding its breath. Elias Thorne, 36 years old. A software engineer who once worked for a large medical company, was the first to open the car door. Tall. With a high forehead and thin-rimmed black glasses that made him always seem to be calculating something. He still believed that moving to Oakhaven was a rational decision, low cost, clean environment, and a new company branch desperately needed a head of medical software testing. But for Clara, his wife, an elementary school teacher, formerly a psychology student, with long brown hair and eyes that always seemed to be listening to something distant, this town smelled wrong. Not the smell of old wood, but the smell of something that refused to die. And Lily, their 7-year-old daughter, lively, with shimmering blonde hair, big eyes like a porcelain doll, hopped out of the car with pure joy, rolling around in the piles of golden leaves, then pointing and shouting, "Look! There's a candy castle over there." Clara followed her gaze. It was just a time-worn Victorian mansion. Peeling paint, fisheye windows, moss-covered spires, and a boarded-up attic. Nothing sweet about it. Their new home was on the edge of town, about 3 kilometers from Oakhaven Hospital. It was bought from a Boston real estate agent for so cheap that Elias joked, "This house must be haunted." No one laughed. While Clara was busy untangling dusty curtains, Lily explored the entire house on her own. She spent most of her time on the second floor, where there was a small room with a window overlooking the forest. When Clara asked, "What do you want to call this room?" Lily replied, without turning around, "My friend's room." "Which friend?" "The one who doesn't have a name yet." "But they know me." "Don't you remember, Mom?" Clara paused. "You just got here." Lily shrugged. "Well, they were here first." The first evening, Elias struggled with the air conditioning system. Every time he flipped the switch, the kitchen light flickered like stage lights. Clara quietly observed from the living room, stroking an old family photo frame, a picture taken in Jersey last year, before Elias was fired for a software bug related to patient medical vital sign monitors. "You once said you'd never work with hospitals again," Clara said, eyes still fixed on the photo. Elias didn't reply. He hated bringing it up, the incident where a patient died because the monitor stopped alarming. He didn't write that code, but he was the last tester. And now, in a cruel twist of fate, he was returning to that very field, in a remote town, in a house with wooden stairs that creaked even when no one was on them. That night, Clara woke up at 2:14 a.m. No specific reason. Just a feeling of being called awake. She sat up, feeling the air heavier, colder, as if someone was watching her from the edge of the bed. And then, she heard laughter. Children's laughter. Soft. Disjointed. Distant and near at once, as if echoing through a long pipe. Clara stepped into the hallway. Light from Lily's nightlight spilled through the crack in the door. She opened the door softly, saw her sleeping, holding her new doll, a red cloth doll they didn't remember buying. The next morning, Lily said, matter-of-factly, "Mom, my friend played marbles on the floor last night. Their marbles glowed, like Christmas lights." Elias chuckled. "Must be the lights from a patrol car, our house is near the main road." Clara was about to argue, but then stopped. In Lily's eyes, there was something, too certain. Not like a child's imagination. 3 days later, Lily started a fever. No signs of flu, no cough, no sneezing. Just an unusually high fever. Sweat poured, eyes tightly shut, lips constantly whispering indistinct words. Clara placed her hand on her daughter's forehead, pulling it back immediately, burning hot. "We have to take her to the hospital," she said, almost screaming. Elias said nothing. Just rushed to the car, carrying his daughter to the back seat. As they turned onto the slippery curve leading down to town, his phone rang, an unknown number, no caller ID. He looked at Clara. She shook her head. He answered anyway. "Hello?" No one replied. Only the sound of a lullaby. A child's voice. Fragile. Off-key. The melody slower than usual. As if someone was trying to sing while being choked. "Sleep, my child, and peace attend thee." Elias looked in the rearview mirror. There was nothing in the darkness behind them. But the singing still echoed. And then, the sound of marbles rolling. A laugh. Small laugh. Prolonged laugh. Right in his ear. The call disconnected. Elias said nothing more. His foot pressed hard on the gas pedal. Oakhaven Children's Hospital was not like the places Elias used to support with management software. It felt like an old, out-of-tune composition compared to its surroundings, long corridors covered in cracked plaster, fluorescent lights flickering unevenly, and the pungent smell of disinfectant mixed with dampness from the forest behind. As soon as the SUV pulled up to the emergency reception area, Clara carried Lily directly into the waiting room, where a young nurse was dozing behind the counter. Clara's gaze seemed to pierce the air. "She has a fever of almost 40 degrees, she's delirious. Her hands and feet are turning blue," she screamed. The nurse immediately sprang up, calling the on-call doctor. Lily was wheeled into the emergency room while Clara and Elias were kept outside the double-paned glass door. Elias wrung his hands, looking at his watch, 3:22 a.m. Clara looked at nothing. She was fixated on an undefined spot in the mist hovering outside the window, where streetlights faintly illuminated the silhouettes of shedding maple trees. They kept Lily for observation. All tests were meaningless. Blood, normal. Organs, no damage. Brain, no signs of infection, no tumors, no inflammation. But she wouldn't wake up. And the bruises kept appearing. Morning on her bicep. Afternoon, it had spread to her calf. Night, more appeared on her chest. Elias took pictures, but every time he looked at them, the area was always blurred. As if something was interfering with the signal. On the second day in the hospital, Clara brought familiar things: Rosie the cloth doll, wooden building blocks, the red rubber ball Lily used to throw around the backyard. She neatly placed everything by the bed. That night, Clara dozed off at the edge of the mattress, her head resting in her hand. Her eyes still fixed on her daughter's forehead as if afraid that a single blink would make her lose everything. A slight sound woke her. Something, rolling on the floor. Clara lifted her head. She saw the red ball slowly rolling. Not on a trajectory, but as if guided. It stopped at the foot of the bed, then bounced gently once, as if someone from behind had lightly kicked it. She sprang up. Rosie, the cloth doll, was still in its original position. But its head had turned, looking straight at Clara. The corner of its cloth mouth subtly creased as if forming a faint smile. Clara ran to the door, turned on the main light. No one. No wind. No sound of a door opening. No night staff were logged in at that time. She breathed heavily, telling herself, hallucinations. I'm sleep deprived. Just hallucinations. But Rosie still watched. The next morning, Lily briefly woke. Her eyes half open, dull and blurry like frosted glass. "Mom." Clara held her daughter's hand, leaning close. "They're here." "Who?" Lily closed her eyes, whispering like a reverse lullaby. "My friend likes to play hide-and-seek. They told me not to tell adults. Do you see them, Mom?" That sentence shouldn't have been so terrifying. But in that moment, Clara felt a cold draft run down her spine. Not from the air conditioning, but from under the bed. On the third night, Clara couldn't sleep. She went to the hallway to get water. On her way back, passing an empty room, she stopped. Affixed to the door was a faded red seal. Faint words: "Do not use, old isolation room, pediatric ward 1947 to 1960. She stood there for a moment, not understanding why. And then, she heard it. Laughter. A short giggle. Clear. Childlike. Exactly the pitch Lily had described. Clara put her ear to the door. Inside, silent. She went back to the night nurse's station. "Room 208, she asked. "Is anyone there?" The nurse, a middle-aged woman, with streaks of gray hair, eyes downcast, replied after a brief hesitation, "That room's sealed. Been a long time." "Why?" "Old story. No one wants to talk about it." Clara quietly returned to the room. Rosie was still on Lily's pillow. But this time, its eyes, 2 cloth buttons, were wet. As if it had just cried. Early the next morning, Elias arrived late at the hospital. He walked through the long corridor leading to the pediatric ward. It was still dark. Fluorescent lights flickered unevenly. He heard a familiar sound. A melody. A lullaby. "Sleep, my child, and peace attend thee." His heart tightened. Not the voice from the phone call that night, but that song. He walked faster. The singing seemed to drift ahead, leading him to the end of the corridor, where an old iron door had been welded shut years ago. He couldn't open the door. But the singing stopped right after that. Not a peaceful silence, but a void drained of sound. When he turned back, he saw the on-duty nurse looking at him. "What do you need in the isolation ward?" "Just. I heard something." The nurse smiled faintly. "There are sounds here, not meant for adult ears." On the 5th day in the hospital, Clara realized she was starting to get used to the groaning pipes. The ambulance sirens echoing through the windows, and the night footsteps that were never accompanied by a person. But what she wasn't used to were the drawings. Lily, in a semi-conscious state, started asking for paper and crayons whenever her eyes opened a little. The doctors said it was a positive reflex. But Clara knew this wasn't Lily. She drew continuously. Initially, it was houses, trees, the sun. But then, the drawings became distorted. Faceless figures. Circles containing strange symbols. Letters written crookedly. Handwriting not like a child's, slanted to the left, as if someone's hand was trembling but still trying to write. Once, Clara caught sight of the scrawled words in red ink on the bedsheet. "My friend is coming." She yanked the sheet off, washed it clean. But 2 hours later, the words reappeared. In the exact same spot. That night, Clara was wiping off the ink stain when she noticed Rosie. The cloth doll, still Rosie. But its pale canvas face now had a long, dark streak from its eye socket down its cheekbone. Like dried tear stains. She used a tissue to wipe it. The stain disappeared. 3 hours later, when she returned, it reappeared. In the exact same spot. Exact same shape. Clara looked at Rosie for a long time. The doll's cloth eyes, black, silent, seemed to know more than anyone else in the room. On the 6th night, Elias arrived late. He had started having insomnia. His work at the company branch required him to test software in shifts, and he was rewriting the vital signs alarm module to avoid the same old errors. He walked through the 3rd-floor hallway, temporarily closed after the COVID epidemic. No patients. Only a gurney tilted to one side, fluorescent lights dimly flickering. And then, he heard it. A lullaby. A female voice. Young. Slow. The melody identical to the strange phone call from the night Lily got sick. Sleep, my child, and peace attend thee. Elias froze. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it echoing in his chest. The singing didn't echo throughout the hallway. It swirled. Focused. As if, singing to him. He walked closer to the gurney. It was empty. The light bulb above him flickered. Then, went out. In that moment of complete darkness, he heard the sound of marbles dropping, ting, ting, ting. Then the light came back on. No more sound. At the same time, in the hospital room, Clara startled awake. Lily was saying something in her sleep, indistinct words. A strange sequence of sounds, repeating. Like a reversed lullaby. She quickly turned on the light. The light flickered once. Then dimmed. She saw Lily's arm being pulled, gently, but clearly, towards under the bed. She wasn't just turning over. That tiny wrist was sliding down, as if pulled by an invisible hand. Clara screamed, lunging to hold her back. Cold. A cold unlike the air conditioning. Not the pleasant chill of a hospital room. But a damp, old, thick smell of earth cold, as if she had just touched a grave. The next morning, Clara checked her jacket. On the sleeve, there was a message written in red ink, "Don't take my friend." She rushed to security, demanding to see the night camera footage. The security guard shook his head, the entire time frame from 1:00 to 3 a.m. was white noise. 'Cause unknown. Also, no one swiped their card to enter that area. Clara was silent. Her hand gripped the photo of Lily holding the doll. That afternoon, Lily woke up for a few minutes. "My friend wants me to go with them." "Go where?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. Lily didn't answer. She just turned her head, looking into the darkest corner of the room, where the nightlight didn't reach. That night, Clara found a new drawing. Different from all the previous ones. Black background. Gray-white figures. A faceless girl standing by the window, holding Rosie the doll. Behind her, was a tall dark shadow, without hands. Without a face, only glowing red eyes watching from the ceiling. Clara gasped, pressing her hand to her stomach. The lullaby echoed again. But this time, not from afar. But right behind her. Cold rain began to pour down on Oakhaven the night before. The hospital eaves dripped water. Daylight was choked by thick clouds, making the entire pediatric ward seem submerged in an unnamed sleep. Clara had been at the hospital for almost a week. She didn't leave Lily's room for more than 15 minutes at a time. Everything became a meaningless repetition. Wake up, wipe her daughter, check the doll, clean new ink stains appearing on the wall, sit and wait, and wait. Elias was busy with work. But sometimes, Clara wondered. Was he really busy, or just hiding? That afternoon, as Clara was folding a thin blanket at the foot of the bed, there was a light knock on the door frame. A boy, about 10 years old, thin, pale-skinned, stood there, dragging an 4-pole across the floor. His eyes were clear, very clear, but held an oldness unsuitable for his age. "Are you Lily's mom?" he asked softly. Clara paused, then nodded. The boy walked in, sitting on a plastic chair by the window. "I'm Max. I'm in the room next door. I've been here a long time." Clara tried to smile. "Are you feeling better?" Max shook his head, as if it didn't matter. "They like Lily," he said, not looking at her. Clara frowned. "Who?" "The invisible friend. The one she talks to. I've seen them too." The air in the room suddenly became heavy as lead. "You met them?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. Max nodded, still not looking at her. "They stand outside my room every night. Don't knock. Just stand there. But they don't come in, because I pretend to sleep. They don't like adults. But if it's a weak child, they'll choose them." Clara sat down on the edge of the bed, her heart pounding. "Do you know who they are?" Max pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his patient gown pocket. It was a drawing in black pencil, scrawled, but clear enough to recognize. A long-haired child, faceless, wearing a patient gown, holding a doll. "I think their name is Sarah. I once heard Nurse Ruth mention it in a dream. Nurse Ruth is sick now, but she still whispers. Sarah hasn't left. Sarah is still here." That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat watching Lily breathe steadily, the nightlight casting a faint yellow glow on her daughter's skin, which was now less pale but still cold. Rosie lay by the pillow, its head turned towards the door. Clara opened her phone, scrolled through the pictures she had taken all week. Photos of bruises, photos of drawings, photos of objects moving. But the last photo, of Lily yesterday, made her freeze. At the edge of the frame, right in the corner of the wall, there was an unusual blur, like a silent shadow standing and watching. The next morning, she found a new drawing. Not by Lily. This paper was from Max's room. Still black pencil, but this time the drawing was more detailed. A little girl holding Lily's hand, both standing in the hospital corridor. Behind them was a long line of blurry children. Faceless. But all of them had bottomless black eyes. Clara folded the drawing, putting it into her jacket pocket. That night, as Clara was changing the bedsheets, a light breeze blew across her neck. She turned around, no windows were open. The drawing Lily had made the day before fell off the table. Clara bent down to pick it up, and when she looked up, words appeared on the old plaster wall. "Do not leave. You will stay here too." The words were etched, not written. Deep indentations, as if fingernails had scratched the wall for hours. She stepped back, bumping into the instrument cart. A nurse ran in, hearing the noise. "What did you see?" the nurse asked. Clara pointed at the wall. But the wall was plain white. Not a single mark. Elias no longer dismissed everything as before. When Clara told him, he didn't say, "You're imagining things." He just remained silent. Then, he printed out a wiring diagram of the hospital. Put on headphones. Remapped the heat signature every hour. He was scared. And he wanted control, by returning to what he knew best, data. Clara sat beside Lily all night. She didn't sleep. Didn't drink. Didn't leave the chair. Only Max's words kept repeating in her head, "They're not human. They just want a friend to play with." After meeting Max, Clara couldn't sit still anymore. Something larger, a system of hidden memories, distorted events, was quietly operating beneath the tiled floors, among the air ducts and old corridors. She needed to know. And her intuition told her, all the answers were in the basement. That morning, Elias took Lily for routine tests. Clara seized the opportunity. She went to the day nurse's station, the old woman named Ruth she often saw reading in the corner. Clara didn't ask directly. She just said, "I keep hearing laughter at night. And seeing signs like, someone who used to live here." Ruth looked up. For a long time. Then she said something that sent chills down Clara's spine. "If you can still hear, it means you haven't been chosen yet." Ruth said nothing more. She just looked towards the gray metal door at the end of the corridor, where a faded sign read, "Record storage, authorized personnel only." The door wasn't locked. Just propped open with an old wooden bar. Clara lifted it. The hinges creaked. The stairs leading down to the world below seemed to swallow the light. Each step echoed strangely, as if the floor was trying to say something with a sigh. Downstairs. She turned on her phone's flashlight. The light swept across rows of dusty file cabinets. The smell of decaying paper, mixed with mold, hit her directly. She groped through each shelf, flipping through folders. Records from 1945, 1947, 1950. And then, a small wooden box, almost wedged between two compartments, caught her attention. Outside it read, "Pediatric Records, 1952. Clara opened it. First page, Sarah Miller, 7 years old. Admission date, September 20th, 1952. Date of death, October 12th, 1952. Medical record, continuous high fever, unknown cause. Uncontrolled seizures. Coughing blood. Subcutaneous hemorrhage. No response to antibiotics. Sudden death after generalized seizure." But what made Clara gasp were the nurse's notes. Sarah talked to someone all night. Toys fell off the shelf for no apparent reason. She drew strange figures on the walls, couldn't be erased. When she died, her eyes were wide open. Staring at an empty corner, no one was there. Clara flipped further. At the end of the file was a loose piece of paper, completely different from the other forms. It was a handwritten letter. Scrawled, written in faint pencil. "They told me I wouldn't be alone anymore. I don't want to go. But they said I could play forever. I'm scared, but I don't want to be left alone." At the edge of the paper were repeated symbols, interlocking circles, 6-pointed stars, cross lines, identical to the shapes Lily had drawn on the bedsheet. Her heart pounding like a drum. Clara flipped the page. A small photo fell out. Old, blurry, black and white. In the photo was a curly-haired girl, wearing a patient gown, standing near a hospital window. To the left of the photo was a blurred empty space, not due to light, but as if someone had stood there and been erased, removed from reality in an unnatural way. The back of the photo read, "Sarah and her friend." Clara was speechless. Then she looked down at the date of death, October 12, 1952. She pulled out her phone, opened the calendar. Today was October 12th. And that was also the day Lily was admitted to the hospital. For a moment, The wind whistling through the vent above her head was like a small laugh. Clara grabbed the file, photo, and letter, and ran out of the basement. The steel door closed behind her with a dry thud, no wind, no force. Just the door closing itself. When she returned to the room, Elias was sitting beside Lily. She was sleeping. Clara said nothing. Just hid the file in her jacket pocket, her gaze lingering on Rosie, the cloth doll, lying on the pillow. Its eyes, black buttons, glimmered, as if it had cried again. That evening, Clara looked at Sarah's photo under the nightlight. And for the first time, in the empty space beside Sarah, a figure began to appear. Not clear, but a child. Long hair, patient gown, dark eyes, abyssal. The room light flickered once, then went out. From under the floor came a thud, as if something had fallen. Then the lullaby, faint, off-key, began to echo in the darkness. And it was no longer distant. It was in the room. Lily slipped into a coma at 1:38 a.m., after a violent seizure that made all the monitors shriek. Doctors rushed in. Clara stood frozen, not crying, not breathing. She just watched her daughter as if witnessing a part of her own body being submerged. All tests were useless. Lily didn't respond. Didn't move. Didn't open her eyes. But the most terrifying thing was that her lips still moved. In the afternoon, Clara sat in the hospital room. Her head slumped onto the bed. Sarah's file lay open on the table, the old photo still showing the faint outline of that spirit, now clearer. It was a little girl, with long, wet hair. Eyes as deep black as well shafts, holding a toy, seemingly rosy. The air in the room gradually became difficult to breathe. Heavy as if pressed by something invisible. And then, Clara heard a clatter. Soft, steady, tapping on the tiled floor. She looked up. Rosie the doll was standing. No one supporting it. No object to lean on. Its wrinkled cloth body still stood upright, as if pulled up by a silent string. Then it spun once, as if dancing. Clatter. A wooden building block flew off the table, falling to the floor. Clatter. Another block fell beside it, forming a spiral shape, like the symbol Clara had seen in Sarah's file. Clatter. 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 Each block flew up, as if thrown into the air by a small invisible hand, then fell into place, forming a magic circle right in the middle of the room. Rosie stopped. The light bulb began to flicker. The rubber ball rolled from under the bed, hit Clara's foot, then bounced. She froze. Before her eyes, the room was organizing a ritual itself. No people. No music. But someone was at work. She ran to the bed. Bent down. Lily was still motionless. But her lips. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Clara leaned her ear closer. Not just one voice. Dozens of children's voices, mingled, off-key, fragmented, as if choked in frail chests. Male voices. Female voices. Crying voices. Laughing voices. Screaming voices, all speaking through her daughter's mouth. She stumbled back. And then, the room door slammed shut. No wind. No one. The door closed by itself. Clara frantically rushed to it, grasping the doorknob. Twisted. Pounded. Couldn't open it. Her phone screen was black. The doctor call button didn't work. Everything was disabled. Behind her. Laughter echoed. Not Lily's voice. Not the doll's voice. But a layered laughter of many children, intertwined, echoing throughout the space as if from a deep well. She turned around. The bed was empty. Lily was no longer there. She gasped. Then, from the ceiling, her daughter's body fell, no sound of falling, no impact. Just a floating, inverted movement. As if gravity in the room was bent. She hovered in midair, eyes still closed, hair gently flowing. And under her skin, scratches appeared. Blood seeped out. Ancient symbols began to form, identical to what Sarah had drawn. Clara screamed. "Please. Don't." A dark shadow emerged from the wall. No clear shape. Just a mass of darkness with glowing red. Abyssal eyes. Rosie fell to the ground. The monitors vibrated violently. All the lights flickered wildly, then went out. Silence. Lily opened her eyes. No longer soft brown. Her eyes were pitch black. Lifeless. Reflecting no light. And from her small lips. "Mom can't stop it anymore. It's time. I have to go." Clara collapsed. Her vision blurred. The room was torn apart like a cut layer of skin. The air warped. The floor trembled with beats not of this world. Unable to scream. Unable to cry. Because reality was shattering. And in the darkness, the breaths of unborn souls began to rise. After that night, Elias no longer cited science. No more, "It's probably an electrical system error." No more arguments about hallucinations due to stress. He walked into the hospital room at 6:13 a.m., found Clara lying on the floor, her lips blue, her eyes empty. Lily was sleeping. Or rather, motionless. No physical signs left except a faint, thread-like breath. Elias picked his wife up. She didn't resist. Just looked straight into his eyes and uttered 3 words. She arrived. They didn't call a doctor. They called Father Thomas. The man who had retired almost 10 years ago, living alone in a wooden house behind St. Helena Church. When Elias found him, he was standing in the garden, holding an old, faded book, his eyes thoughtful as if he had been waiting for this call for a long time. Father Thomas listened to everything without interrupting once. He didn't smirk, didn't doubt. Just sighed deeply when Clara mentioned the name Sarah Miller. "That child never left," he said, his voice deep. That afternoon, he came to the hospital. Carrying an old cloth bag, inside were a wooden crucifix, a faded bottle of holy water, and a thick Latin Bible. As soon as he stepped into the room, the temperature dropped. No one touched the switch. No one opened the window. But the air became thick, as if compressed by his very presence. Father Thomas stood beside Lily's bed. The child remained motionless. He brought the crucifix closer. Immediately, the crucifix became scorching hot. His hand turned red. "There's a small soul here," he whispered. "It's lonely. It's holding Lily as if she's the only thing it has left." Clara gripped Elias's hand. Lily's lips moved. Not words. Just the wind, breaking. Father Thomas placed his hand on her forehead. "Ice cold. Can you cast it out?" Elias asked. The priest was silent. Then he said, "This is a child specter." The room seemed to tremble as those words were uttered. Father Thomas looked at them. His face serious, his voice slow. "Child specters are the souls of children who died in injustice, or died alone, unburied, unremembered. It doesn't know it's dead. It repeats its last memory. Seeks friends. Seeks a place to belong. Elias trembled, so. Sarah? Sick at a time when medicine couldn't save her. Locked in the basement. No one by her side when she died. She isn't seeking transcendence. She's seeking a playmate. Clara collapsed, holding her head. Lily doesn't deserve this. Father Thomas knelt by the bed. Pulled out a book, its pages almost rotten. He began to read. Exorcizo te, spiritus imund. The lights began to flicker. Wind hissed through the wall cracks, not real wind. But suppressed laughter, twisted through a throat. Elias retreated, pulling Clara into his arms. Lily began to speak. But her eyes didn't open. Her lips moved. Father. I'm so scared. I'm cold, don't leave me alone. Father Thomas stopped reading. His eyes slightly closed, trembling. Clara burst into tears. That voice was Sarah's voice. As he continued his reading, from under the bed came a rustling sound, like fingernails dragging across a stone floor. A small figure slowly crawled out. It was a 7-year-old girl. With long hair, wearing a patient gown, barefoot, her face pale. She stood upright. Her eyes were deep black, bottomless. And she held Lily's hand. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe. Sarah tilted her head. One shoulder was severely dislocated, as if it had been broken. And then, she smiled. A toothless smile. Emotionless. Just the gesture of a soul that had waited too long. Father Thomas continued reading, his voice louder. Sarah didn't scream. Didn't vanish. She just watched. A gaze that pierced through all protection, all prayers, all fear. The gaze of a child who no longer had hope, only the instinct to cling. Clara collapsed. Please save my daughter. The light bulb exploded. Children's laughter echoed throughout the hallway. Footsteps running. Gurneys rolling unattended. Pencils drawing on walls. The room seemed to become a cradle for souls that never grew up. Father Thomas stopped. He turned to Elias. We must perform an exorcism. Tonight. Otherwise, Lily will no longer be Lily. 2353. The hospital room was temporarily sealed. All vital sign equipment was moved out. Only Lily, motionless on the bed, Clara sitting on the left, Elias on the right, and Father Thomas standing by the closed window. In the dim light of the shadows, the three said not a word. No need to speak. All of them knew, this was the time to choose between life and losing Lily forever. Midnight, the ritual began. Father Thomas stood straight, holding the crucifix. His voice deep and echoing in ancient Latin. Exorcizo te, omnis spiritus imund. The air immediately changed, like opening a door no one should have touched. There was no wind, but the curtains began to sway gently. The temperature dropped so low that Elias's and Clara's breaths became visible mist. The smell of disinfectant was replaced by the damp smell of wet earth, old paper and something like smoldering hair. 006. Lily sat up. Didn't open her eyes. Didn't scream. Just sat upright. From her throat came a sound that could not be called human. I'm not going, this is my home, don't steal my friend. Father Thomas stepped closer, crucifix raised. He sprinkled holy water around the bed, while chanting. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. 009. The light bulb exploded. The room plunged into darkness. Rosie, the doll, turned its head 90 degrees. The rubber ball rolled down the hallway, then reversed into the room, hitting the table leg and bleeding. Blood of unknown origin, but real. Red. Fresh. Warm. On the wall, lines of writing began to appear in blood as if someone was writing directly. She is my friend. Don't take her. 012. Lily began to float. Her small body rose. Arms outstretched as if hung by invisible strings. Her eyes opened wide, completely black. Each time Father Thomas finished a line of scripture, Lily's body jolted, as if electrocuted. 00. 15. New scratches appeared on her skin. They formed by themselves, lines, streaks, as if scraped by invisible fingernails. Some lines formed demonic symbols, identical to the shapes Sarah had drawn. Elias screamed, rushing forward to pull his daughter down. But an invisible force pushed him against the wall. 018. Clara knelt at the foot of the bed, screaming amidst the incantation. Lily, listen to me. I'm here. I won't abandon you. You're not alone. Lily hovered, her head tilted to one side. Her lips curved into a distorted smile. From her mouth came overlapping children's voices. Stay, stay and play with me, stay forever. 021. Father Thomas stopped reading. He took a step back. His voice dropped, hoarse. It's not alone. Sarah didn't go alone. She dragged the others with her. Immediately, from all the dark corners of the room, giggles echoed. Windows warped. Tiles vibrated. Shadowy. Small figures appeared on the room's walls, child shapes, but without eyes, without mouths. They clung to the walls, crawling around the ceiling. 023. Clara, in despair, clawed at her own arm. She screamed. If you have to hurt to stay, then I'll take it. Her nails tore into her skin, blood seeped out. Lily froze in midair. Father Thomas seized the moment, raising the crucifix to her forehead. I command you, by the blood of the mother, by the love of the living, be gone. 024. Light erupted. Not the lamps. Source unknown. A blinding white flash tore through the darkness. Lily fell onto the bed, heavily, unresponsive. The vital sign monitor shrieked. Heart rate dropped. Then, surged. Then, stabilized. 00. 26. Absolute silence. Elias lay huddled on the floor. Clara knelt by the bed. Father Thomas collapsed into a chair. Lily's eyes closed. Then, slowly, opened. Brown eyes. Real eyes. She whispered. Mom. Clara burst into tears. From the end of the hallway, children's laughter echoed again. But this time, very distant. As if those children had left. For now. On the morning of October 15th, the faint early autumn sun quietly shone through the hospital window, casting a pale yellow glow on Lily's peacefully sleeping face. The vital sign monitor had stopped beeping. The 4 line was removed. The doctors entered the room, looking at each other silently. No explanation. Only 2 words were repeated on the chart. Sudden recovery. Lily woke up at 10:34. Eyes open. Lips slightly moving. The first thing she said was, "I dreamed, you held me very tight." Clara's voice caught. Elias turned away. Father Thomas just sat in the corner of the room, eyes half closed, his lips whispering a final prayer. That afternoon, Lily was discharged. No one held them back. No one suggested further tests. Perhaps, everyone who witnessed that night agreed, some things shouldn't be mentioned again. The Thorne family got into their car at 17:05. The sky was cloudy, fog thicker than usual. The drive home was long and silent. The wooden house on the edge of Oakhaven seemed unchanged. Still the creaking wooden stairs. Still the windows overlooking the forest. Still the sealed attic. Clara put Lily to bed. Her pillow had been changed. Stuffed animals neatly arranged. Rosie, the cloth doll, had been left at the hospital. Elias said he accidentally forgot it. But in Clara's eyes, it was intentional. First night at home. Everything unusually quiet. No laughter. No wind sound. No footsteps in the middle of the night. Clara made tea. Sitting beside Elias in the living room. They didn't talk much. Just occasionally squeezed each other's hand gently, as if neither of them still believed they had made it through hell. 00. 17. A sound echoed from upstairs. Soft. Very soft. Like the sound of marbles rolling on a wooden floor. Elias jumped up. Clara gestured, "Let me." She walked very slowly up the stairs. Each step like counting her own heartbeat. Lily's room door was ajar. She was sleeping. Holding in her hand, a doll. Not Rosie. But very similar. Same fabric. Same black buttons for eyes. Only, one side of the doll's cheek had a long, dark streak, as if it had cried. Clara moved closer. Bent down. Lily opened her eyes. "They're back. But don't worry, Mom, they just want to play." Clara clutched her daughter's hand tightly. Cold. Not the cold of a sick person's skin. But the cold that used to be, in the hospital room. She looked into the corner of the room. Nothing. But the night lights subtly flickered. Downstairs, Elias was putting away the teapot when the red rubber ball rolled out into the middle of the hallway. He froze. No one touched it. No wind. This silence was not the end. It was just a breath, before the loop began again. A week passed since Lily returned home. She ate normally. No more fever. No seizures. Didn't wake up in the middle of the night. The bruises completely disappeared. Her hair grew back unusually fast. Her eyes were clear as crystal. From the outside, Lily was a completely healthy child. But Clara knew something was wrong. Clara tried to take Lily for a walk in the park. She didn't react to bird sounds. Didn't look at flowers. Didn't ask for ice cream like usual. Just looked into empty spaces. Sometimes while walking, she would stop, turn to the air beside her and say, "Do you like this place?" "Yeah. This place is much more fun than the hospital." Clara tried to smile. But her hand clenched so tightly it drew blood in her palm. Elias returned to work. But he came home earlier than usual every day. Every night he checked the cameras, locked the door 3 times, and hid the crucifix in a drawer. When Clara asked why, he just replied, "Just in case." Then he turned away. But she saw, his eyes were always red. 8th night after discharge. Laughter echoed from Lily's room. Small laugh. Soft. But not pure. It was like a child pretending to laugh. Clara and Elias both sprang out of bed at the same time. They ran upstairs. Lily was sitting in the middle of the room. Toys were scattered around. Wooden building blocks, the new cloth doll, and the red rubber ball. All of them moving by themselves. A wooden block spun in the air. The doll turned its head towards the door, looking at Clara. The ball rolled around Lily, then stopped, right at Clara's feet. She looked up, smiling. "My friend misses Mom and Dad so much. They said playing alone is so sad." Elias recoiled. Clara knelt down, trembling. "Lily, which friend, honey?" Lily tilted her head, gently. "My friend doesn't have a name. But they're not going anywhere. Mom shouldn't go either." That night, Clara secretly entered her daughter's room. Lily was sleeping. But her mouth was smiling. Not a childlike smile, but a distorted smile. The corner of her mouth pulled sideways. Eyes slightly open, empty. Clara whispered, "Are you still there, Lily? If you are, squeeze my hand." No reaction. But in the corner of the room, the nightlight subtly flickered. A small shadow flickered behind the curtain. The next day, Elias rechecked Lily's wardrobe. In the drawer, he found a new drawing. It depicted a house with 3 people, Mom, Dad, and a little girl. Beside them was a 4th figure, faceless, armless, but holding Lily's hand. Below the drawing were scrawled words. "No one in the family will ever have to leave each other again." That evening, as Clara turned off Lily's nightlight, her daughter softly said, "I'm so happy. My friend said if I'm good, then Mom and Dad will get to stay with me too. Forever." Clara stood frozen. The light bulb flickered. From somewhere in the house, the sound of the ball rolling. That house would never be quiet again. Not because of a curse, but because the door had been opened. And when a child's soul finds a place to belong, it will never let go. People often say that children can see things adults have forgotten. They look into dark corners of a room and see a friend. They hear calls from the basement and think it's a game. They smile at the air and believe someone is smiling back. But what happens when those friends never want to leave? Sarah Miller died 70 years ago. She had no funeral. No next of kin to claim her body. No one by her side when she stopped breathing. Only a cold hospital room. And a doll, Rosie, that fell to the floor. Lily Thorne survived. She returned from the brink of death. But did she truly come back alone? Or did something cling to her, hiding in the laughter, concealed in the toys? Living in memories that medicine couldn't explain? The Thorne family believed that love could protect their child from all darkness. But sometimes, love alone isn't enough. Because there are souls that do not seek banishment. They seek acceptance. And once the door is opened, it cannot be easily closed. So what about you? Next time your child laughs at an empty corner of the room, when a toy suddenly changes places, or when you see your child whispering to a friend no one else can see, don't be quick to smile. Don't be quick to call it imagination. Because perhaps your child is not alone. And you will never find peace either. Sometimes we are the ones who carry the curse without knowing it. Because the past, once buried, will always find a way back. Youth is about choices. Some choices bring freedom, and some choices open the door to hell. Do you believe that an innocent soul, deprived of life before it could utter its first cry, can return to demand justice? Welcome to Whisper Horror Channel, where forgotten sins are exposed in the darkness. Tonight, we will tell the story of a girl who tried to bury her past. But that past found its way back, bringing with it a chilling hatred. Listen carefully, because perhaps the wailing you hear in the night is not the wind. Aurora. A 20-year-old with striking highlighted hair and a daring fashion sense, was the life of every party in Miami, Florida. She possessed a sharp beauty, eyes sparkling with rebellion, and a devil-may-care smile. Although only 20, Aurora managed to support herself comfortably through her job managing social media for several up-and-coming local fashion brands. This allowed her not only to cover her bills but also to enjoy the vibrant nightlife of this coastal city, where dazzling neon lights and all-night parties were an indispensable part of the party culture. Aurora had no shortage of friends, and she quickly became the ringleader of a group of 5 young and free-spirited girls. Skylar, 21, was Aurora's closest friend from high school, having gone through countless ups and downs together. Skylar was a fashion design student with an artistic soul and a sensitive heart, always supporting Aurora's decisions even when she didn't fully agree. Chloe, 20, was the queen of parties, whom Aurora met at a music event. Chloe was the daughter of a well-known nightclub owner, always stood out with her trendy fashion sense and a craving for new, sometimes risky, experiences. Bryn, 22, was a mysterious girl whom Aurora met at an underground art exhibition. Bryn was a freelance programmer, discreet and often kept her distance, but her eyes always radiated sharp intelligence, and she was never absent from any of the group's outings. Finally, there was Olivia, 19, the youngest in the group, a first-year psychology student whom Skylar introduced. Olivia was naive, easily influenced, and always idolized Aurora and her free lifestyle. Aurora's life and that of her friends revolved around endless parties, without any limits. They frequently gathered at secret bars, private parties in secluded resort villas, with nights of heavy drinking, throbbing music, and impulsive decisions. They believed that youth was for experiencing, for living to the fullest without calculating consequences. During a night out at the Obsidian, an ancient bar hidden in a small alley, far from Miami's dazzling lights, Aurora had a fateful encounter. This bar wasn't as noisy as typical nightclubs, but had a classic, slightly gloomy charm with mellow jazz and blues music. While sipping her cocktail and observing the crowd, Aurora's eyes accidentally met a young man sitting alone in the corner, engrossed in playing his guitar. He was Elijah, 25. A freelance musician with long, romantic black hair and deep, calm eyes. His appearance and demeanor were in complete contrast to Aurora's bustling life. Amidst the dim lights and gentle melodies, Elijah's gaze brought Aurora a strange peace, a feeling completely different from anything she had ever known. They started talking, and Aurora was captivated by his depth and calmness. Elijah didn't judge, he just listened, and his perspective on life made Aurora feel like she was discovering a whole new world. Elijah's strange allure rapidly changed Aurora's life. She began to abandon all-night parties, stimulants, and gradually distanced herself from her old friends to spend all her time with him. Aurora found peace and true meaning in quiet date nights, deep conversations about music, art, and life. This sudden change made her friends feel abandoned and unable to understand. They constantly tried to contact her, wanting to pull Aurora back to their familiar revelries. Just 1 week after Aurora's change, the first incident occurred. Late one night, As Aurora was falling asleep after a peaceful evening with Elijah, her phone suddenly rang. It was Chloe's number. Aurora quickly answered, but on the other end was only chaotic screaming, piercing sounds of shattering glass, and loud dance music. Then suddenly, all sounds vanished, leaving only a faint whisper, as if echoing from underwater, ghostly and incomprehensible. She doesn't want to give up playing. Immediately after, the signal was abruptly cut. Aurora tried to call back, but there was no signal. An indescribable sense of unease enveloped her, signaling that her new life might not be as peaceful as she imagined. Aurora's unease quickly became a horrifying reality. Just 2 days after the strange call, Chloe was found dead in the swimming pool of an abandoned villa in North Miami, where the group often gathered for secret parties. The scene was chillingly and eerily silent. The cause of death was determined to be drowning, but the pool was less than knee-deep for an adult. Local police, after a preliminary investigation, concluded it was a tragic accident due to intoxication, with no signs of struggle or foul play suggesting external interference. However, there were details that made Aurora and Skylar shiver. At the scene, on a large mirror in Chloe's bathroom, police found words written in lipstick, "I don't want to be alone." The handwriting was scrawled, shaky, more like a child's drawing than an adult woman's. Police believed Chloe wrote it in a drunken delirium. But what haunted Aurora the most was when she secretly glanced into Chloe's jacket pocket. Placed at the edge of the pool before the police sealed it, she saw a small, old, dusty cloth doll. This doll had eyes sewn with red thread, staring menacingly. And no one in the group had ever seen Chloe own that toy. That night, the horror continued to cling to Skylar, who was closest to Chloe. She fell into a strange, terrifyingly vivid dream. In her dream, Skylar saw a faceless child, with long, soaking wet black hair, playing with Chloe in the clear blue water of the pool. The child hummed a strange lullaby, an old and haunting melody Skylar had never heard before. Then the child slowly pulled Chloe deeper. Chloe didn't resist at all, just smiled weakly, her eyes lifelessly looking up at the starry night sky. Skylar woke with a start, drenched in sweat, the strange lullaby still echoing in her ears. She tried to reassure herself it was just a bad dream, but the image of Chloe smiling underwater with the nameless child haunted her mind. Chloe's mysterious death still cast a haunting shadow over Aurora and Skylar's minds, when just a few days later, another disaster struck, pulling them deeper into the vortex of horror. Bryn, the discreet and mysterious girl of the group, was found in her apartment, hanged from the ceiling. The scene showed no signs of struggle or forced entry. The door was still locked from the inside. Police once again concluded it was a suicide, believing Bryn had been struggling with depression unknown to anyone. But for Aurora, that explanation could not soothe the growing fear within her. She recalled Bryn's empty gaze during recent gatherings, her unusual aloofness, and the cryptic messages Bryn had sent before her death. Bryn's phone, crucial evidence, was confiscated by the police. After many attempts, they discovered Bryn had sent a message to Aurora minutes before her death. It says, "It doesn't want you to escape. You are my friend." This message was strangely encrypted, with jumbled characters interspersed, making it almost impossible to trace its origin or sender. Police believed this was a form of cryptic suicide note or due to Bryn's unstable mental state, but Aurora felt a chill reading it. Chloe's smile underwater, the doll with red thread eyes. And now this mysterious message, all seemed to connect in a terrifying way. Elijah, Aurora's boyfriend, though not fully believing in the supernatural, seeing Aurora's panic and the abnormal signs, decided to use his digital skills to help her. He tried to recover data from Bryn's phone. After hours of tinkering with specialized software, Elijah discovered a final photo taken in Bryn's room. Just minutes before her death. The photo showed an empty corner of the wall, nothing special. However, when Elijah adjusted the contrast and brightness, a small, blurry, almost transparent figure gradually emerged. It was the shape of a child, standing with its back to the wall, but its head was turned back, staring directly into the lens with deep, dark eyes. Elijah recoiled, startled. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. He showed it to Aurora, and she almost fainted. The child's face in the photo bore a cold, emotionless expression. But its eyes contained a ghastly haunting. Absolute terror turned into true horror that night. Aurora's phone suddenly rang at midnight. The screen displayed Bryn's number. Aurora's heart pounded wildly in her chest. She looked at Elijah. He stared back in shock. Elijah tried to reassure her, thinking it was a network error or a missed call from the system. But Aurora, with the intuition of someone being hunted, couldn't ignore it. She trembling answered the phone. On the other end was only static, like a weak signal, but then, a childish, cold, ethereal giggle echoed, followed by a faint, distorted whisper, as if choked from the throat. "Mom, don't you want to play with me?" The signal was lost immediately after. Aurora dropped her phone, her face ashen. That call of a mom, though just a whisper, pierced through her mind, sowing extreme terror. She wasn't a mother to any child. So what was that call? The invisible fear now had a voice, a childish yet utterly threatening voice. The horror had barely subsided after Bryn's death when it escalated again, pushing Aurora and Skylar to the brink of despair. Olivia, the most innocent girl in the group, who had always been a small light in their dark days, suddenly had a seizure at home and died on the way to the hospital. Doctors couldn't find a clear cause. They only offered vague speculations about drug shock or underlying cardiac conditions. But these were far from convincing. Aurora and Skylar knew this was no coincidence. Skylar, with her sensitive soul, had sensed unusual things about Olivia in her final days. She told Aurora that Olivia had been frequently singing a strange lullaby lately, an old and haunting melody that Olivia said her new friend taught her. Initially, Skylar thought it was just Olivia's prank, but later, the child sang it more and more, and Skylar began to recognize a terrifying familiarity in the melody. After Olivia's death, Skylar searched and horrifyingly discovered that the song was an ancient lullaby, once locally forbidden due to its association with magical rituals and mysterious infant deaths decades ago. It wasn't a song a normal child could know or sing. When Aurora went to the morgue to see Olivia one last time, a horrifying sight etched itself into her mind. Olivia's eyes were wide open, deep black, pupils absent, staring straight at the ceiling with an expression of extreme terror, as if she had witnessed something horrifying just before taking her last breath. This wasn't the gaze of a normal deceased person, but the gaze of a soul imprisoned in eternal dread. In Olivia's room, amidst psychology books and personal belongings, her latest drawing was found, scribbled with childish yet haunting pencil strokes. The drawing depicted a group of children playing in a large circle, and in the very center of the circle was a deep, dark hole, from which a small, slender hand reached up, as if trying to pull something out of the ground. The smiles on the faces of the other children in the drawing were radiant, but their eyes were empty and lifeless, staring directly at the viewer with an uncanny eeriness. Aurora stared at the drawing, a cold sensation running down her spine. This drawing wasn't just a child's imagination, it was a warning, a clear allusion to what was happening. All the deaths, all the signs, were pointing towards something invisible, malevolent, and relentlessly pursuing them. Olivia's death was the final blow, crushing the last glimmer of hope left in Aurora and Skylar. The group of 5 friends was now reduced to 2 young women struggling in extreme fear and utter bewilderment. Both were trapped in a nightmare they couldn't wake from, ceaselessly searching for an explanation, an escape from the invisible specter pursuing them. Skylar, with her sensitive nature and strange dreams, became increasingly vulnerable and acutely aware of supernatural phenomena. She began to see things Aurora didn't see, hear sounds Aurora didn't hear. Skylar's haunting wasn't limited to dreams. She constantly dreamed of a child. In her dreams, the child didn't speak, just quietly played with Aurora's own familiar toys, an old cloth doll, shimmering glass marbles, or faded wooden building blocks. Each time the child finished playing, it would turn and stare directly at Skylar, displaying a twisted smile. A smile devoid of childlike innocence but filled with malice and eeriness. That chilling giggle not only echoed in her dreams but also clung to Skylar's mind even when she was awake, becoming a persistent echo in her head. Reality relentlessly pushed Skylar into terror as well. When Skylar was alone in her apartment, she suddenly heard the faint sound of marbles rolling under the floor. The sound wasn't like marbles dropping randomly, but a steady rolling, as if someone was actively playing. She searched everywhere, from the living room to the kitchen, and finally, she found a shimmering glass marble lying on the kitchen floor, rolling gently as if someone had just released it. It was one of Aurora's childhood marbles, which Skylar remembered seeing Aurora keep in a keepsake box. In extreme panic, Skylar quickly picked up the marble and threw it hard into the corner of the room, wanting to dispel the invisible presence. But immediately, a soft, faint childish cry echoed from somewhere in the house, like a reproach, a warning, almost causing Skylar to collapse. The nightmare relentlessly pursued Aurora. One night, as she slept soundly in Elijah's arms, her phone suddenly rang. The phone screen blazed in the darkness, displaying Skylar's number. Aurora woke with a start, her heart pounding. She looked at Elijah. He, too, was awake, his eyes anxiously on her. Aurora hesitated for a moment, then trembling answered the phone. On the other end was only the static of a weak signal. But then a child's voice, with a cold and ghostly tone, whispered through the phone, "I'm coming for you, Mom." After that sentence, the signal abruptly cut out again. Aurora almost dropped the phone. She couldn't understand. That call of Mom wasn't the first time she'd heard it. A sense of extreme horror enveloped her, an indistinct yet incredibly close fear. As if the ghost not only existed but was drawing very near. The nightmare had reached its peak. The call, "I'm coming for you, Mom," from Skylar's phone sent Aurora and Elijah racing to her apartment. But it was too late. Skylar lay there, on the cold floor, clutching a tattered old cloth doll, her eyes wide and lifeless staring at the ceiling, her face etched with extreme terror. On her wrist, a purple bruise in the shape of a child's hand with 5 long, slender fingers, was clearly visible. Skylar's death was neither an accident nor a coincidence. It was a cruel sentence from an invisible entity. As Elijah knelt beside Skylar, he trembling picked up her journal. Every scrawled, shaky line on the last page cut into his heart. "It's the baby. From that night. It's looking for us. It wants revenge. It wants its mother. And it will take everything, everything." He stopped reading there, his eyes wide. A cold current ran down his spine, bringing with it a painful, buried memory. Not about Aurora, but about himself. Elijah recalled his own past, his impulsive youth. He too had once had an intense relationship with a girl. And then, an unwanted event occurred. He, with the immaturity and selfishness of youth, forced his girlfriend to abort the pregnancy. He used to think it was the only solution to protect both their futures, to avoid being tied down by an unwanted child. He had lied to himself that everything would be okay, that he could bury that past. But now, witnessing the horrific price Aurora was paying, he realized that karma spares no one. He himself had caused similar pain, had taken the life of an innocent soul. The long-suppressed remorse suddenly surged, gnawing at his heart. He felt a strange karmic connection with Aurora, as if fate had brought him to her to witness and bear a part of the consequences of similar sins. His own understanding and despair made him swear he would never leave Aurora. While Elijah was immersed in his torment, a sudden cold blast filled the room. The bedroom door, which had been left ajar, suddenly slammed shut, emitting a dry, echoing sound like breaking bones. The room plunged into thick darkness. Aurora and Elijah were trapped in the dense night. The faint crying of a child echoed, not from afar, but from right within the room, very close to them. The crying was no longer weak, but filled with extreme resentment and pain, like the wailing of an abandoned soul. Aurora recoiled, bumping into Elijah. In the darkness, a small, blurry shadow gradually appeared, standing right in front of her. The shape was distorted, warped, indistinct, but Aurora sensed the presence of a child. It extended its small, slender hands towards Aurora, not to attack, but as if to cling, to be embraced. From that distorted shadow, a childish, broken, but deeply sorrowful voice echoed. "Mom. Mommy. Why did you abandon me? I'm so cold." A shiver ran down Aurora's spine. Tears streamed from her eyes. The images of her friends' tragic deaths, the haunting lullaby. And now this direct confrontation tore through all layers of denial. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing in utter despair and remorse. "My daughter. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. My daughter. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry." Aurora recognized the child's gender through its voice and the form it created in her mind. It was a little girl. She tried to reach out towards the shadow, wanting to embrace the child she had rejected, wanting to be forgiven. The ghostly shadow still stood there, its tiny hands still reaching towards Aurora. Its crying still whimpering. Elijah witnessed it all, his heart aching. He understood that Aurora's repentance was just the beginning of a painful journey of atonement. And he, with similar sins in his past, would never leave her. He would stay by her side, bearing the cost of their mistakes with her, no matter how terrifying that cost might be. From that moment, a silent vow was made in Elijah's heart. He would spend the rest of his life caring for and protecting Aurora, as a way to atone for his own sins. The horrifying truth about the child taken from her dealt a heavy blow to Aurora's mind, plunging her into the depths of despair and guilt. Fear now had a face, a name, and a cruel motive for revenge. Elijah, though initially disbelieving in ghosts, was convinced after witnessing Aurora's extreme panic and the undeniable evidence on Skylar's body. He believed Aurora was in real danger, a threat beyond scientific explanation. He decided he had to protect her at all costs. Elijah quickly took Aurora away from Skylar's apartment, bringing her to a secluded wooden cabin, deep in a sparse forest on the outskirts, far from any trace of the bustling city. He cut off all her contact with the outside world, turned off her phone, disconnected the internet. He installed a complex security system around the house, with surveillance cameras, motion sensors, and sturdy locks, hoping to create a safe fortress against the invisible entity. He believed that, if he isolated Aurora from all external factors, the ghost wouldn't be able to reach her. However, Elijah's protection proved futile against the power of the child's spirit. The child's spirit seemed to be everywhere, needing no door to enter, no path to appear. The lights in the wooden house began to flicker incessantly, sometimes blazing then abruptly extinguishing, sometimes flickering like a dying candle. The faint sound of marbles rolling softly echoed under the empty floor, even without wind or any movement. Childish, cold giggles emanated from dark corners, from empty hallways, from under the bed, keeping the air in the house heavy with haunting. Aurora dared not sleep, dared not be alone. She clung tightly to Elijah, crying in despair. The presence of the child's spirit not only haunted Aurora but also began to manipulate Elijah. He started exhibiting strange behaviors. He frequently had bizarre dreams of children, of faint crying, of small hands reaching out from the darkness. During the day, he sometimes heard a lullaby echoing in his head, a terrifyingly familiar melody, even though there was no audible source. Elijah began to doubt his own sanity. He became irritable, suffered from insomnia, and his face visibly hollowed out. He wondered if he was losing his mind, or if Aurora's fear had spread to him. One morning, as Aurora woke in Elijah's arms, a chilling sensation ran down her spine. She saw a small, fresh scratch on her abdomen, forming the shape of an M for mother, lightly etched into her skin. It wasn't a wound from an impact or accident. It was a mark of possession. A cruel declaration that no matter how far she ran, the child's spirit would never let her go. It had marked her, asserting ownership over the mother who had rejected it. The M-shaped scratch on her abdomen, the incessant sounds, and Elijah's deterioration pushed Aurora to her breaking point. She realized they couldn't escape this ghost on their own. Despite being utterly terrified and previously disbelieving in spiritual matters, in this desperate situation, Aurora decided to seek a final rescue. She knew of an old church in the Miami suburbs, where an old priest, Father Michael, was known for his extensive knowledge of supernatural cases and experience with exorcism rituals. Under the cover of night, Aurora and Elijah drove in silence to the church. The old church, with its moss-covered stone walls and dark wooden doors, exuded a solemn yet mysterious aura. Upon meeting Father Michael, Aurora didn't hesitate. She knelt and confessed, recounting her entire past, including the abortion and the tragic deaths of her close friends. Father Michael listened with a solemn expression, his aged eyes full of understanding. After listening, he confirmed that this was a case of a vengeful child specter, an innocent soul deprived of life before birth, capable of clinging and seeking revenge on those who caused its death. He explained that this resentment was so strong it relentlessly pursued and imprisoned Aurora, the mother who had rejected it, as well as those who had conspired in that cruel decision. Father Michael began the exorcism ritual rite in the small church room. He lit candles, placed sacred objects, and began chanting ancient Latin prayers. The air in the room became suffocatingly tense. Faint childish crying echoed throughout the church, sometimes weak, sometimes piercingly loud, as if hundreds of children were wailing at once. The candles flickered wildly, their flickering light creating ghostly shadows dancing on the walls. Sacred objects automatically shattered. Holy statues fell to the floor, Bibles were torn apart, as if an invisible hand was struggling to resist. Father Michael remained steadfast, continuing the ritual. But it seemed the child's spirit was too powerful, or too deeply connected to Aurora, so that the ritual couldn't fully banish it. In the climax of the ritual, as the crying and screaming reached their peak, Aurora fainted. Unconsciously, she found herself standing at a dark crossroads, shrouded in mist. The surrounding space was eerily silent. Only darkness enveloped her. Suddenly, a child took her hand. The child didn't speak, didn't cry, just looked directly into her eyes with deep black eyes. Aurora felt the resentment gradually fading in its eyes, replaced by a deep, boundless sadness. The child softly whispered something Aurora didn't clearly hear. A faint message that echoed forever in her mind, then it slowly let go of her hand and disappeared into the hazy darkness of the crossroads. A cold sensation enveloped her as it vanished. But along with it came a strange tranquility, as if a burden had been lifted. Aurora woke up in the small church room, faint morning light filtering through the stained glass window, casting dim streaks of light on the cold stone floor. Elijah sat beside her, his face showing visible exhaustion but his eyes still full of worried concern. Father Michael stood there, his face gentle but tinged with sadness. He said that the child's spirit had accepted to let go of its resentment, no longer intending cruel revenge. Everything seemed to have returned to peace. The tension in the air had dissipated, replaced by an unbelievable stillness. When Aurora tried to recount what had happened, about the crying, about the deaths, about the unconscious confrontation with the child's spirit, Elijah looked at her with confusion. He only remembered that she had experienced severe psychological shock after the deaths of her friends, and Father Michael had helped her calm down with prayers. He no longer remembered any details about ghosts or the supernatural phenomena they had experienced. The child's spirit had erased his memory of its existence. As part of the letting go, it extended to those not directly involved, or perhaps it simply wanted Aurora to be the only one to face the consequences. Although Elijah remained by her side, an invisible distance had formed between them, a distance of truth that only Aurora carried in her heart. The pain and regret gnawed at Aurora incessantly. The deaths of Chloe, Bryn, Olivia, and Skylar were all consequences of her cruel decision in the past. The soul of her child, though having let go of its resentment, remained an inseparable part of her life. Aurora understood that she couldn't return to her old life, couldn't live carefree and irresponsible as before. All-night parties and frivolous gatherings were now just haunting memories. She no longer deserved ordinary love or happiness. For Aurora, the peace Father Michael spoke of was not complete liberation, but another sentence, to live with guilt and eternal repentance. Aurora decided to abandon her old life, leaving the noisy city and painful memories behind. She couldn't stay with Elijah, because she knew she would forever carry this burden. A burden he couldn't share or understand. She chose to live in solitude, dedicating the rest of her life to good deeds, helping those in need. Unfortunate children, as a way to atone for her past mistakes, hoping to find forgiveness for the child's soul and for herself. She sold everything she owned, donated most of the money to charities, and found a small, secluded house near a monastery, where she could live in reclusion, far from all judgment and worldly chaos. However, Aurora's solitude was never truly solitary. Every night, when Aurora was alone in the quiet house, a soft, familiar lullaby would emanate from somewhere in the room. It was no longer terrifying, no longer carried hatred, but was a sad, haunting melody, like a constant reminder of an unshakable presence. Aurora knew it was her child's song, of the soul that had not left. She began to hum along, every night, like an essential ritual. A lullaby for the child that never lived, a lullaby for her own sinful soul. She realized Father Michael couldn't do anything about the child's spirit. It hadn't left. It had only accepted to stay with her, forever, as an inseparable part of the rest of the mother's life. Liberation was not disappearance, but accepting coexistence in this tragic haunting. Aurora lived a life imprisoned in her own home, a prison without fences or bars, yet incredibly solid due to the tragic bond with her child's soul. She no longer feared it in a conventional way, but felt a strange attachment, a painful yet inseparable relationship. She accepted its presence as a part of herself, a permanent consequence for the mistakes she had made in her daily life. Aurora always sensed a small, invisible presence by her side, like an inseparable shadow. When she was doing good deeds, tending her small garden, or simply walking in her yard, children's toys would gently move on the floor by themselves, or glass marbles would roll inexplicably when there was no wind or anyone touching them. These were undeniable signs of its existence, of a soul that clung to her, never letting go. One evening, as Aurora sat alone in the living room, humming the familiar sad lullaby, the old, tattered cloth doll that Chloe once owned, the toy that had mysteriously appeared at the beginning of the story, suddenly subtly nodded. Aurora looked up at it, and a strange, incomprehensible, yet complicit, smile appeared on her face. Her eyes shimmered with a deep, empty gaze, as if another soul was looking through her eyes. She knew she was humming a lullaby for her child's soul, and in that moment, the boundary between the living and the dead seemed to merge. She had become a part of it, and it was a part of her. Elijah still frequently visited Aurora, bringing food and stories about the outside world. He still loved her, but he couldn't understand the profound change within her, or what she was going through. He just thought she was slowly recovering from the shock, but wasn't yet ready to reintegrate. He didn't know that, each time he left, the door would close again, and Aurora would immerse herself in her own world, where the lullaby and the invisible child's giggles were her only companions. She no longer tried to explain to him, because she knew he couldn't understand, and perhaps it was best that he didn't. The sad children's lullaby, the distant ticking of a clock, the children's giggles from various directions, gradually blended into the adult's humming, forming a chilling symphony. Finally, only the solitary, haunting lullaby remained. They say that forgiveness is medicine for the soul. But there are some sins that can never be fully cleansed. And there are some souls, once born from the darkness, will forever be a part of you. Do you believe that just by repenting, all mistakes will be overlooked? Now, listen carefully. Right in your own home. Is there a lullaby that you don't remember who is singing? Or a faint giggle, echoing from a hidden corner you can't see? Because it's very likely that child has found its mother. And you could be its next mother too. If you're still hearing this, consider yourself lucky. Because not everyone survives knowing the truth. What's dead is not always gone. And sometimes, the fear you try to avoid is already knocking from the other side. Thank you for watching Whisper Horror Channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you still have the courage to hear the next whispers.